everybody, welcome back. Now we're getting on a schedule and we're making videos and being consistent. So welcome back. Last time we kind of gave you a life update, talked about what was going on with us while we hadn't uploaded in a long time, and now we're just going to talk about a serious topic.
Yeah, so I guess since we just got married, a lot of the topics that are kind of on our mind is about being married. And one of the questions that some people ask us, some people don't have the guts to ask us, but
they're scared.
But they're wondering, why did we get married so young?
That's a great question. I'm glad you asked.
Thank you. Why did we get married so young?
Well, we have a list. There are a lot of reasons. So, just to start it off, getting married young is a good idea for some people, but not for others.
It made sense in our lives.
Yeah, it made sense for us. That doesn't mean it's going to make sense for you. But I think I'm not trying to make everything, if you can check the boxes, but if there are certain boxes you can check, and if you pray about it and you feel like that's what God is calling you to do, then I think you should do it. Obviously, if God's telling you not to, you shouldn't do it.
Yeah, I think ultimately the number one thing is to make sure that you have prayed about it and that you know that is the person that God has for you. And if He's on your side with it, you're going to be fine. But God also tells us to make wise decisions. So He wouldn't want us to make a decision that's going to put us in a bad place. And we'll talk more about the reasons why.
So I think the first, and it's probably outside of praying about it, which we'll get to in a minute, but this is probably the biggest reason we got married so young. We dated for a really, really long time. I was 15 and she was 13.
Yes.
So, what was it, 6 years that we dated?
Yes, so our 6-year anniversary was literally 3 or 4 days before our wedding. So we had been together for a very long time. And I think when you're 13 and 15, maybe you think you're going to get married, but you don't. I don't know. It's a weird thing because you don't really know that you're going to get married. You're like, oh, yeah, we're going to get married. And then 6 years later, when it actually comes true, you can't believe it.
Yeah.
It's a weird feeling, but it's also really cool, and I really like our story. I'm glad we were dating that long.
Me too. I think whenever you date so long, I'm a creature of habit, so like for me, it wasn't as big of a deal as it was for her. But it kind of becomes monotonous over time. Like it's like just the same thing. And when you date for 6 years, there comes a point where you kind of feel like you've done everything you can do in dating together, and you're just kind of ready to take the next step and move. I guess take the next step and just move on.
Yeah. So, I guess with us being, with us having dated so long and being Christians, there's just so much, like, what would you say?
Temptation?
No, that's not even what I was talking about. So I think with us having dated so long and we are Christians and our ultimate goal was to get married. Like, I remember even when I was super young, my parents or my mom would tell me, dating or courtship or whatever you believe in is the ultimate point of that is to get married and to find your lifelong spouse. And so I think for me that was a big deal. I was like, okay, I know who I'm going to marry. What's the holdup?
Yeah. And I think, and we'll probably get to this here in a few minutes, but once you find the person, obviously you need to do it in God's timing, but you don't want to just kind of hang out in this place where honestly there's a lot of temptation in dating that long too. And so you have to be careful not to just hang out and just stay in this place of dating when you have the ability to get married. But I guess we'll get more into that in a minute.
Yeah. So one of the biggest things, like if you're thinking about getting married young, is number one, praying about it. But number two, making sure that you are in the best financial position to get married. And that's something Brandon's really good about talking about, because that was one of the biggest things that actually held us back.
So
other than our age.
Yeah. Naturally, I'm a spender. I usually get things in my head and like I save up, buy that really big thing, and then think of something
Start all
else
over again.
and start all over again. So whenever we got married, I just started. I wanted to put ourselves. My biggest concern was putting ourselves in a bad financial position, and I would say my biggest piece of advice, not that I'm like, we've been married a long time, but as somebody who's went through the process of trying to figure out if we should get married young, if you're not in a good financial position, you shouldn't do it. Like, if you don't have jobs, you probably shouldn't get married. Or if one of you don't have a job that can support both of you, you shouldn't get married. But I was a natural spender, and whenever we got engaged, we obviously, almost all of our paycheck went to savings other than what we had to have to live, in which we lived with our parents, so it really wasn't like we needed a ton other than gas and the occasional meal. So I started watching Dave Ramsey, and he just started, figuring out how to make smart money choices. So, paying off debt. I had a little bit of student loan, so I paid that off. We did purchase a house, so it is really the best debt. Not that any debt is really good, but it's the best debt you can go into because it gains value over time. It's a appreciating asset. It gains value over time. So making sure that financially you can do it, I think, is a really big deal outside of making sure God's okay with it. So we got together and we budgeted out, what we thought that we needed to make in order to get married. What we it's hard to judge what some of your bills are going to be until you get them. But, judging, hey, what is our light bill going to be? What is our water bill going to be? Car insurance, health insurance, phones, everything that goes along with having a house. We kind of budgeted that out and try to figure out, okay, making this amount of money, is this even realistic?
Right. And on our budget that we did, honestly, when we were just talking about getting married, before we had even gotten engaged, and when we were doing that budget, like you said, it's kind of hard to know exactly what the bills were going to be, but we would kind of budget it on the high end. Yeah. That way we knew that if our bill was on the high end, we weren't going to be in a bad position.
And so, and some of those things have ended up being on the high end, like our light bill has ended up being on the high end, but then there's other things like our water bill that's been really low. So it really balances out. But yeah, making sure you're in a good enough financial position, and I think the best thing to do is avoid debt. If you want to be in a really good financial position, avoid debt. You would be surprised.
Even if you're not married, we encourage you to avoid debt. And we also think that, or we believe that the Bible encourages that. And if you don't listen to anybody about like money and finances, we both like Dave Ramsey and his daughter Rachel Cruz. They have really good shows about, or I guess radio shows or whatever, about financial peace and walking in that through God's Word. So another reason why we got married young was because, or maybe this is just one of the benefits that we found of getting married young. It really gave us like a head start in life. Like we're so young, but we're already married. We already have a house. We're already like so far, not so far into our lives, but just, I don't know.
We're ahead of where others are, but that, I don't think that, and like she just said, it's really just a benefit. It shouldn't be the determining factor in you getting married, but I think it is a benefit if it works out that way, that you can be a little bit further ahead in life.
Never let it be a competition like, oh my gosh, this couple just got married, so now we have to get married. That's not a thing. You get married when you're ready, whenever you feel like the Lord wants you to, and you and your spouse are, or I guess not spouse yet, but you and your significant other are in agreement with that. Yeah, so you also want to like talk about it even before you, I guess, get engaged. If you're young and you don't know that that's necessarily coming, I guess.
Communication is key in marriage and in any relationship. So communicating about, just the process of getting married, the logistics, does it make sense, is important.
Mm-hmm. And we also have a lot of support. Like, not every one of our family members necessarily wanted us to get married, but they were behind us all the way, and they were there to help us out and just give us wise counsel. And not only that, but before we got married, we did premarital counseling, and we had some counselors from our church that really poured into us and really taught us a lot about marriage and budgeting and finance and all the things that go into marriage.
So, and I mean, if you look at the numbers, I mean, just simply getting marriage counseling reduces your chance for divorce by 50%. And I think a lot of that's because if you're willing to pour into your marriage, I think you generally find people with more of a commitment to their marriage. And so I find it's very important. I think you should get a Christian counselor, but just any counseling in general, I think, helps, because at the end of the day, it's a relationship between two people. And if you don't learn how to be in a relationship, if you don't learn the keys, especially as a Christian, to having a marriage, it's really difficult. And so I think having a counselor, having counselors really helps you as a young married couple. So that's kind of not really a determining factor. If you should.
Not necessarily why we got married, but just part of the things that helped us get married young, if that makes sense. So this was just a video that we wanted to do to answer some questions about why we made that decision at such a young age. But we're happy, and I hope we'll stay happy. I know we will.
Don't hope, please.
We will stay happy. And marriage isn't always easy, but it is always good. And we hope you enjoyed this video. Please give it a like or a thumbs up or whatever those YouTube
Tell your
words
friends
are.
And
Tell
your families. And
comment
leave a
down
comment
below. Turn your notification bell on. All those cool things, you know.
That all the other YouTubers
Be a
tell you
part
to
of
do.
the fam.
Don't ever say that. I promise you, we will never put the word fam in our name.
What's wrong with that?
I'm not going to say anything's wrong with it. I just don't like it.
Bye, guys.
See you later.